And good evening, everyone. And as you heard, the Coach McVay Show has a special guest tonight. We welcome Les Snead with DeMarco Farr. I am JB Long. The Rams off to Week 5, Thursday Night Football in Seattle. Before we get there, Les, what were your emotions watching the first loss of 2019 at the Coliseum yesterday?
Well, you realize that losing is probably more powerful, more painful, stings longer, feels worse than winning. So you remember that emotion. But like you said, the reason I'm here tonight is we got a Thursday night game. So like every week, whether you have an emotional win or an emotional loss, you've got to put it behind you. That defines Week 4, doesn't define Week 5. We're certain of what happened Week 4. We're not certain of what's going to happen Week 5, but we are certain what we want to have Week 5. So that's part of this business, is kind of putting those emotions in the pocket, working through them so that you can be purposeful, impactful, and productive during the week to prepare.
You know, it's a long season. It's a recipe, if you will, so sprinkle in a little adversity. It could make you better. So I think one of the things that stood out to me was when Coach McVay said right after the game, this will not define us. This could be a blessing. We're going to get better because of this. So sometimes a game like that could actually be beneficial in the long run.
Yeah, I definitely. But again, our 2000 whatever. How you're going to define the 2019 Rams is a cumulative of weeks 1 through 17. Like I mentioned before, we're certain of what happened week 1, 2, 3, and 4. Not certain of what's going to happen weeks 5 through 17. But it's up to us to figure out who we're going to be the rest of the way. But I agree. As humans, I always go, let's say winning ugly, sometimes there's lessons in that, and it's similar if you're on a ship and you're thinking that you could take on water. So you try to fix what would happen if you do start taking on water. But I do know this, a loss is actually taking on water. Mm-hmm. So as human beings, there is a different feeling when you go, wait a minute, the boat's a little bit closer to going under than it was before. So that's the difference probably between, let's call it learning and correcting in a win and learning and correcting in a loss.
You made a fairly nuanced point there along the way about the identity forming of the 2019 Rams, and it reminded me that I think in some ways this group has been victimized by their own success. I think externally they're being compared to the 2018 Rams and what they achieved on offense, on defense, on special teams, and in the win column. This group, though there is some carryover, is not the 2018 group. And you've said that all along, that you don't get to start from 13 wins. You start from 0 all over again.
Start from 0, and I go, in each week, there is some really good military philosophers that say when you prepare for battle, the enemy has a say. And in the NFL, on a very smaller scale, the opponent does have some say. So our 2019 opponents are different than their 18 opponents, and they, as Coach Arian said after the game, a win like yesterday can galvanize a team. What that means is each opponent you play is gonna give you their best. They're going to do some things different against you, and you become a chance to have a statement win. That is a compliment. So it's a good let's call it phase to be in. But again, you still got to go play the game and then ultimately win the game.
Right hand to God. I mean, I think that's the best I've ever seen Jameis Winston play. Anybody? The guy was consistent. It was amazing. Like you said, the opponent has a say, and he was pretty damn good on game day. You got to give him his credit.
Yeah, and it's interesting. My wife, who spent time in the media business, I've always, I guess you would call it, not complained, because you realize you're in the entertainment business, but the way the NFL is covered, which is awesome, a little bit superficial, but because last weekend Daniel Jones gets his first win, had a comeback win, but ultimately, Jameis made a couple of throws, and they're a field goal away from winning that game. But if you'd watch the entire game coming into it, it wasn't just Daniel Jones getting his first win for the Giants. It was also a talented QB. We played him our last game in the Dome in St. Louis, and he probably threw for over 300. But let's call it from their opening game this year under a really good coaching staff, Coach Arians, Coach Leff, which rest of that group, you've seen a talented QB progress and maybe play his best game against us. So it shouldn't be unexpected if you would have sat down and not just said that last week's game or their game since that San Francisco game was all about Daniel Jones.
You're right. I mean, Matt Gay makes a field goal at home against New York, and what we're talking about is Jameis Winston maturing and leading a game-winning drive.
We're probably still talking about Daniel Jones.
A little bit.
Right.
But that's the nature of this business, New York market, and the way it goes. But I do think it does take away from, let's call it a lot of plays, maybe 60 times, maybe 180 plays since the San Francisco game that Jameis has played in, and not the so many, not the 9-yard fourth down conversion that Daniel Jones ran in for the win that week. But
he's Rams General Manager Les Snead with DeMarco Farr. I'm JB Long, the Coach McVay Show presented by In-N-Out. That's what a hamburger is all about. We'll talk about the Rams quarterback a bit later on in this program, but a few more thoughts specifically to Week 4 and the loss against the Bucs. You know, just like the defeat in the Dome last season where you almost got over the crest and you learned something about your ability to fight out of a deficit, I feel like this had a similar vibe yesterday. Did you think when Marcus Peters brought that back into the end zone that they were going to finish that job?
I did. Here's what I did know. We're in it, and we got a legitimate chance. It's 8 minutes to go.
From down 3 touchdowns.
Down 3. Now, again, y'all were there. You were watching. That's one play that Jameis probably wishes he had back. What I did know is, okay, Tampa Bay's offense is going right back on the field. And up until that play, and probably up until maybe their second drive, we had struggled to stop them. So I did have in my mind, okay, wait a minute, we're going to have to reverse a trend that has been reoccurring during this game, and that's Jameis and their offense being able to convert on third down and move the chains and go down and get touchdowns and field goals. And subsequently, that's what they did on that drive. So even though we scored the touchdown on a great defensive play by Mark's great run, give him credit for taking that punch at the end. And we're jacked that he was okay and will be ready for Seattle. But you did know, okay, you still had to go finish that game off.
How is he ready for Seattle after a hit like that? I mean, that was a horror show, Les. My goodness.
That is a big load, too. That is 330 pounds.
On a dead run.
Yeah, a dead run. So, again, I think the tight end from the Colts, Jack Dole, said it best. I really didn't feel it, so I give my helmet credit. So I guess, hey, as we've evolved helmet technology, this will be a time to maybe let's all give helmet technology a big hand, because
give that man a cigar. Yeah. Wow.
Final thought of this segment, and that would be, does the short week, but also the fact that it's a division opponent in the first you'll play in 2019, make it easier to make that turn? I mean, it's essentially a 3-horse race in the division right now as it shapes up in the West, and your 2 opponents happen to be next on the schedule.
I think because the loss stings, as we mentioned before, you feel the loss more than you feel the win. So, yes, we're ready to get back on the horse and go play right now. Now, the nice part, right, it's early in the season. We don't have as many injuries. So you could be at a phase where you're going, I wish we had more time to get people ready to play. And it is nice to play a somewhat familiar opponent. That helps in game planning, but I do know that, like us, they've changed some things from last year, so you got to prepare. But we're definitely ready to get back and try to avenge yesterday.
Les Snead is in for Sean McVay tonight at Cal Lutheran in Thousand Oaks with DeMarco Farr. I'm JB Long. A deep dive on Jared Goff, his performance through the first quarter of the season, plus behind the scenes of his contract extension as we continue this evening. A Week 5 edition of the Coach McVay Show on ESPN LA 710.
Over the last 4 games, I wouldn't say we executed extremely poorly. We just probably didn't execute up to our standard. And we did go 3-1, and we did win some games and do some good things offensively. But I think yesterday is a perfect example where, we did execute well on a lot of fronts and did do a lot of good things, but just consistency and doing it for the whole game was not there. And I think that speaks better to what we need to do better, is just be more consistent and be, more focused, plan and play out. And it starts with me, and it starts with just every play, every day in practice, just being better and just continue to raise that standard and raise our level of play.
That was Jared Goff earlier this evening addressing the assembled media. We continue with DeMarco Farr and the general manager of your Los Angeles Rams, Les Snead. I'm J.B. Long. So that was Jared evaluating the first quarter of his 2019 season. How would you evaluate your quarterback's performance at this stage?
I think he said it very well. You know, we've had moments where we've executed very well, made really good plays, and then there's moments that we haven't. What if any insight would I give the offense? Would I give Jared credit for? Right, you're adjusting to a new center, and now you're actually living through it, which is an adjustment. Brian's different than John, so that's a nice evolution and process. I know each week, because we get the opponent's best there. You know, there have been times that they're doing things differently than what they've shown their normal tendencies to be. So you got to go through a few series to kind of figure out maybe what they're doing and how you attack it. And that's probably that has some cause for some of the slow starts, even though that's insight. I know Sean will call that an excuse. He never would, but that does go on. So I give everybody credit for adjusting to probably our new reality during the 2019 season, and then I think as we go forward, as we say, weeks 5 through 17, we will get more comfortable working together, you know, with new faces on the offensive line, with the way defenses are attacking us and things you're going to have to adjust to. So, but you know what's interesting as you watch that tape yesterday, and I give the offensive line and Jared credit when it did get to, let's call it 11 point, 18 points, 21 point leads, and we knew we had to throw the ball to come back, and they're a very aggressive blitzing team. So there was a lot coming at that bunch, the offensive line and Jared, and they you know, for many drives there in a row, were able to connect and move the ball and score a lot of points under a lot of duress. It could have been a game where maybe Shaq Barrett and their DL continued to accumulate a lot of sacks, but instead our group fought and got the ball out and made plays.
Yeah, not to make excuses, like you said, 68 pass attempts and only sacked twice. That's pretty damn good. And like you said, when you grow, you have to cross off a bunch of firsts. So everything new is going to be learning. You're going to get better. But I think we all agree football is life. 1st and 20, that's tough to overcome. I don't care who you have at quarterback. When you're hurting yourselves with these pre-snap penalties and you drop yourself to, you know, 1st and 20, 2nd and 15, hard to dig yourself out of that, especially when they got a lead.
Yes, that's a very tough hole. It makes your like I said, you're just less efficient. You got to drop back and throw it. But I give them credit. I think Jared and Sean, everyone said it best. You know what? We're I don't know if it's excited, glad, but we're okay with being 3-1 right now. Mm-hmm. But we're well aware that on all phases we've got to learn and then apply and continue to evolve and execute better and get stronger. Well,
just from your perspective, you scouted, drafted, you're developing all these guys. When you see veteran guys make mistakes, uncharacteristic mistakes, how does that make you feel? Or what do you think when you see guys that don't normally false start or hold, or forget holds, just false start, make those type of penalties in games? What's the first thing you think about?
Well, I always kind of look at it from a holistic approach, because usually if there's a veteran who's been consistent and then maybe has had a couple plays that you'd put in the inconsistent manner, right? So we had some false starts yesterday. So again, you could get back to adjusting to a new center. Is that an issue? All of those things you can't just look at it as one person being maybe unfocused that day. But we have been making some uncharacteristic, let's call it pre-snap penalties that we haven't done that really put us in a bind, especially early in yesterday's game. So those are things you got to go to the drawing board and look at and try to figure out the why.
You're listening to the Coach McVay Show. Les Snead in for Sean tonight as the Rams face a short week going to Seattle for Week 5 with a Super Bowl champion, DeMarco Farr. I'm JB Long, live from the Rams facility in Thousand Oaks. We kind of landed on the offensive line a little bit there, so why don't we dig deeper into that? Is it fair to say that's a group you would continue to evaluate internally and externally in the next month or so while you can to try and fortify what's in front of Jared Goff?
Well, I think here's what the reality is we let's just take, and Brian Allen and Joe Noteboom has had a successful season to date, but you would think if we continue to progress like we plan on, that the more experience they get, the better they're going to get, with all nuances. That's not just making blocks or let's call it making adjustments when things go from black or white to gray. That usually occurs. The more reps you get, the more experience you get. I think I've heard Andrew Whitworth say it, and I'm probably going to misquote. He says, "Hey, ultimately, when you're young, and you get your first starts, you got to learn how to play. Then eventually you learn how to play good, and then eventually you get to a stage maybe where he's been the past few years where you play good, but you also help the younger ones learn how to get to play good." So I think in all position groups, when you're putting together the architecture of a team, just 18's different to 19. You're going to have some youth at places and some experience at places, and the goal is to let's call it get the youth up to speed as quickly as possible.
What I'm hearing a bit there is that internally there still seems to be some trust in the pieces who are here, and that through Sean McVay and Aaron Cromer's leadership, the players that they are now will not be the same as they will be in October and November and hopefully into January.
You definitely, that's always the case, and let's call it that. Those are looking at each individual piece, and I do think we've heard it said right from the holistic part. The unit, you definitely want to be playing your best football. Let's call it come November, December, into January, as a unit, not just the pieces that make up the unit.
Well, continuity, especially with the offensive line, we know is certainly the key to 2017 and 18 within that group of 5. This year they've gone through some changes personnel-wise and already an early injury to Austin Blythe. Great to have him back in the lineup on Sunday against Tampa Bay. Still to come, we'll get Les Snead's thoughts on the Sean McVay Show on his rookie class, including Taylor Rapp, the latest on his injury and how the first-year safety has contributed to a loaded position group. That's as we continue tonight on the Coach McVay Show, live from Thousand Oaks on ESPN LA 710.
It feels like a long time ago. I don't know why, but I think obviously we've been through a lot. Came here through OTAs, had a little summer break, 5 weeks off before training camp, went through training camp, went through the preseason, and now we went through the first 4 games of the regular season. So it feels like a century ago, but at the same time it kind of feels like it's like yesterday.
That was Taylor Rapp earlier today on the Rams Revealed podcast, discussing the phone call he received from Les Snead, which originated from this room, making him the top pick for the Rams in the class of 2019. We'll talk about some of the rookies and their contributions to the first quarter of the season. Here with Les Snead, filling in for Sean McVay with DeMarco Farr. I'm JB Long. Sounds like good news on the injury front for Taylor Rapp. We'll see whether or not Thursday is within his range, but it could have been a whole lot worse. How about his early contributions? When you made that phone call, did you envision him stepping into that dime linebacker role and impacting games the way that he has defensively so far?
Of all the players we called that day, you could have said we were sure that he could step in and do what he's doing now than any, based on who he is, how he plays, how he approaches the game behind the scenes. But I think I've heard Wade said it best, right? In Wade's uncanny wit, right, that he's got the perfect last name Rapp because he does. He's a clinic tape in terms of Rapp tackling. And so a lot of what he did at Washington up near the line of scrimmage, how they used him because he could be more dangerous, more effective, more impactful for them there. He's doing for us in some of our dime nickel packages and and has a short area quickness to to cover some people in the slot. So what he did at Washington and how he looked there, he looked very similar here. Like all rookies, the more reps, more experience he gets, the more things he sees. Because it's a little bit more complicated at this level than that level, the better he's going to get.
Just someday, I wonder if you have all three safeties on the field, like he never leaves the field. Instead of nickel packages, he's out there as base defense. And then if they go 11, he stays on the field. Is that where we're headed with guys like him, with Taylor Rapp?
I definitely think so. Obviously, as the game spreads out a little more. Again, we're playing Seattle this week, right? All of a sudden it gets a little more condensed, so probably depends on the opponent. But as the game spreads out, a safety, and we have a lot of them, and maybe all of them, whether it's John Johnson, Eric Weddle, Taylor Rapp, and Marquis. I mean, they can come in and not, let's call it be an Achilles, not be a weakness up near the line of scrimmage in the run game, but actually a strength. So I think you gotta be versatile to be able to do it, because you certainly can't be up there and be a bullseye to let's now attack that person in the run game.
We'll circle back to the tailback, Darrell Henderson, in a moment. But since we're talking Huskies, since we're going to Seattle this week, let's talk about the other UW great, Greg Gaines. Seems to be right on the cusp of like that active-inactive roster, the 46 on game day. Where is he at in his progression through his rookie season?
I think he through the preseason looked very similar to what he did at Washington and at what he did at the Senior Bowl against a lot of offensive linemen who ultimately got drafted in the first round. And that was at the Senior Bowl. Now, and he's actually been active one game and has played. But again, we're a veteran team with maturity, so a guy that we drafted last year. I always say the sophomore class is kind of the forgotten class, in that maybe they hadn't played like Sebastian Joseph, but they're not sexy like your latest draft picks, so they're kind of the forgotten class. And Sebastian has through OTAs and training camp to earn a spot in that rotation and has played well. Again, like all our young guys, more reps and experience he gets, the more he sees, the better he's going to get.
Got a sack. Yeah, got a sack this week. Big, strong dude, yeah.
Big, strong guy. A little bit of a tackle for loss, but, Sebastian was a let's call it, at Rutgers, struggling program, but when you watched film, you knew this was a big, long, athletic person. And then when he went and wasn't invited to the combine, went and did his pro day. We were talking at the break. We call it the non-football. Some people call it the underwear Olympics. This wasn't even at Indy. This was at his pro day. But some of his short shuttle drills and things like that, they measured up there with some really, really good players. And I think the sack demonstrated some of that, where he went upfield, changed direction, and was able to accelerate to chase Jameis down from behind. So
should have two. Yeah, if he didn't get the face mask. Yeah, should have two sacks.
Oh, on Teddy.
Yeah, no doubt, right?
See, there's youth, right? You got to learn to rap and not grab the face mask.
Absolutely, yeah.
The Coach McVay Show, presented by In-N-Out. That's what a hamburger is all about. And Les Snead, nice enough to sit in for Sean McVay with us this week as we prepare for a trip to Seattle. We know where Henderson is at in terms of the depth chart, so maybe that can just lead to a broader conversation about your running back room as it stands. What's your take on Todd Gurley, Malcolm Brown, and with Henderson supporting that group on game day?
Well, it's tough to talk about running backs today after you just threw the ball 68 times, True. And especially a day where you were all of a sudden down by 21 in the first quarter. I don't think any of us predicted that. That's football, right? Unexpected happened, so it puts you in a situation where you were probably going to have to throw to run. So I do think, here's what I do know what teams are definitely trying to do is they're trying to, and they're doing some things schematically to go, we're going to stop your running attack. They don't want us to be balanced. So that we're going to have to try to fix so that we can be a little more efficient overall on first down and end up being, in some 2nd and 5s and 4s based on first down. And I think that gets the running. Also, I think, when you do connect early in the pass game, it's going to free up some holes. But if you go back to Todd Gurley's second touchdown run of the day, I do think going forward, especially early in the game where, hey, he got 4 yards, there wasn't a lot there, and he just went between a crease and said no one's going to get between me and that goal line. I think I think the goal for all of our running back room is on some of those first down runs when we're on the other side of the 50. We're probably going to run very similar to that before we start seeing some creases.
Locking down Todd Gurley, they're daring you to throw. Is that kind of what they're doing?
Well, I think Todd Gurley's been a huge part of the offense. The play action pass has been a huge part of the offense. You come in and you want to start. I mean, you want to stop something. So I think because of his success. Again, coming into the season, right? Since he's been in the league, no one's gained more yards or scored more touchdowns than him. So in the simplified Belichickian, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take their best weapon out of the game. I think that's probably a very simplified approach to someone who, up until this point, basically led the league in distance traveled and led the league in crossing that goal line with 11 defenders trying to keep you from getting there.
We won't be able to go through the whole draft class on this show, of course, but before we break here, what about Troy Reeder, who has a chance to maybe start in your base if injury dictates this week on a short week? What was it that you liked about him coming by way of Penn State and then Delaware as an undrafted college free agent?
Well, interestingly, because he's unheralded, good athlete, can run. So he started earning his keep here on special teams, and as we got to the very end, he was a guy that Coach Bowen said, you know what, if he's on our team, he's dressing, or I'd love for him to dress, and we got a place for him on the core four. So, but as you went through preseason, what you did notice in the box, there's some processing from a central nervous system that things happen quickly in that box, and he has a way to process things and sift through some traffic and maybe, let's call it, fill his gap, make some tackles up near the line of scrimmage versus maybe 3 to 4 yards deep. So I think that takes physical ability as well as some central nervous skills as well.
Bryce Hager ahead of him with Micah Kaiser down on injured reserve. Sean McVay saying earlier today that Bryce will be day-to-day game-time decision with a shoulder stinger. All right, still to come, one of our audience's favorite topics, how you spend Stan Kroenke's money. And every time you give out a contract extension, how will you fill out a roster in the future and stay under the salary cap? We'll pose a few of those questions when we continue with the Coach McVay Show, live with Les Snead from Cal Lutheran in Thousand Oaks on ESPN LA 710. Hope you're having a great Monday night. Thank you for spending part of it with us. JB Long, DeMarco Farr, and the general manager of the Los Angeles Rams, Les Snead. A short week off to Seattle, the first NFC West game of 2019 for your 3-1 Rams. All right, this is one of my favorite kind of social media knee-jerk responses anytime a good thing happens for this organization, which is you extend one of your homegrown talents. And lately, in fact, since last summer, the Rams have agreed to approximately $300 million in guaranteed money to 4 players, Gurley, Cooks, Donald, and Goff. And there's some consternation, Les, that you're not going to be able to fill a 46, much less a 53-man roster in 2021 and beyond. Are you okay with how this is looking for the future?
Well, let's go this. We will be able to fill a 46-man roster. I can promise you that. Might not be able to keep 53 players. That's kidding. Now, so let's take the social media approach and go, hey, is this a rational take? Is it impulsive or what have you? But the rational side of that is there is an element of truth there, right? Once you make a decision to pay one of your players, and our goal is to pay one of our pillars, right? There is an element, once you do that, you're automatically at that point taking some other options off the table. That is correct. From the social media, that's a fact, because we're in a league that is capped, and that's like any budget, whether it's family budget or NFL budget, right? If you spend more on your car, you may have less for your house. If you buy a vacation home, you might not be able to go out to eat. That's simplified. So what you do have to do. So now let's try to calm the fans down. There is an element where you got to draft and develop, similar to what we did maybe with Brian Allen and Joe Noteboom. You would prefer to draft specifically, and then develop them, and then implement them, and preferably maybe a year later. But some draft picks can play early depending on who they are. You're also going to have to supplement, let's call it, with veterans like Eric Weddle and Clay Matthews, who may be on third, fourth contracts toward the end, want to be a part or come to a team that has a chance to compete, but maybe, let's call it, their salaries are not at where they peaked in their second and third contracts per se. Definitely got to do that, and you definitely got to also ensure some positions. It's similar to last year with Ramik Wilson, right? Or when we signed N'Keal Roby, guys for whatever reason were cut by one of their teams, but has experience, and you usually get them on prove it deals. So there's ways you can manage this situation. I think the Patriots have done it as good as anyone. But let's call it the fans are correct when you do decide on paying someone. It does probably eliminate paying someone else. That's just a fact.
The pillars, as you described them.
Definitely want to, that is the goal, to play the pillars. I think DeMarco would appreciate this. What we would love to do is when you pay a player, especially the magnitude of those guys that you were mentioning, that their teammates in the locker room go, oh, yeah, they deserve to be paid. Hey, what are they thinking upstairs, per se? You know what I mean? That's you try to walk through that, because, as you know, in the locker room, whether it's player 1 through 53, usually the smarter, aware players, whether you're sitting there at, hey, I'm the 28th best player on this team, usually you're pretty rational and go, okay, that's the second best, or he's in in that category. So it's always a goal we're trying to do, so that we can always say we're not collecting talent, we're trying to build a team.
It's weird in today's NFL economy. It seems like a fan base, when you get to the point where you have to pay your quarterback, they go, oh, that's it. We're not going to be able to field a competitive team. We're going to have to go light here. We're going to have to go light there. But it seems like there's been enough teams doing this that there might be a good game plan on how to pay this guy, keep your core group, your pillars, and build a good football team at the same time.
Oh, no, and I think if we take a step back, right, we could probably name what we consider the pillar quarterbacks of the league, right? First name that came to my mind, Drew Brees. Mm-hmm. He's been paid well for a lot of years. New Orleans Saints have been pretty competitive for a lot of years. So I think that would be the debunk of the theory, right? They New Orleans Saints, or Pittsburgh Steelers when they have Big Ben, predominantly Green Bay when they've had Aaron Rodgers, Colts when they've had Peyton Manning. So you can the name, the list can goes on. Those teams were competitive. They did win championships. You're probably not winning one every year. So that can't be the measuring stick of what success and competitiveness is.
Following that train of thought, you believe that Jared Goff can develop into one of those quarterbacks, and I'm wondering if you can take us behind the curtain a little bit this summer. What made this the right time, and from Jared's standpoint and his representatives too, to get this done before the 2019 campaign?
Well, I think it does help you begin to plan for the future, like our fans have been discussing on social media. As soon as you, let's call it, make that uncertainty a certain, that helps you moving forward with your other uncertainties, so to speak. So, and again, Jared with Sean in this system, they've won a lot of games together. We definitely use analytics around here, but I don't memorize them, so I don't know how many games we won or haven't. But I do know this: we got to be top 4 in wins. We're probably top something in offense with those two working together. So
only as a result of yesterday, New England nudged back in front of you in terms of games won since Sean was hired.
So as we say with QBs, right? Again, QBs measured stats, but measured by wins, and then eventually you're going to be measured by championships. The higher up that totem pole you get. And you know what? Jared's checked a lot of boxes in terms of stats and wins and got us to this. It was a part of helping us get to the Super Bowl as a collective last year.
We appreciate Les Snead hanging out with us on this Monday night, anticipating a Thursday night football showdown with division rival Seattle. We'll get his take on the state of the Seahawks as we finish up live from Cal Lutheran on ESPN LA 710. All right, glad you're with us. DeMarco, JB, and Les Snead. And I've been meaning to ask you this since we left Houston, the final preseason game. And by the end of that weekend, Seattle had acquired Jadeveon Clowney and resolved that whole situation that we were living through in Houston at the end of the summer. What was your reaction when you saw that talented piece come to a division rival defense?
Well, selfishly, you wish your let's call it your most bitter opponents, and they happen to live in your division, do not acquire talented players. But that's the selfish, emotional, if I had a Twitter account, person in me. But what I do know in the NFL, when you're rational and sit back and take the emotions out of it, guess what? Good franchises, and they've been good to great for a while now, do things like that to get better consistently. Mm-hmm. And I think you give that bunch credit for they went on their run where they were NFC champions a couple years in a row, won a Super Bowl in there, finished runner-up one year, and then somewhat went through a phase of lost it a little bit, but then recovered pretty quickly. That just shows you, let's call it, how good their run from top to bottom in that organization.
I go back to a few years ago, or I don't know how many, the doubt on Russell Wilson, like, is this guy going to be any good? And you watch him now. He just continues to get better playing quarterback.
Well, it's interesting, right? I mean, we play him twice a year. I mean, I think I tell Russell, after every game, if he wants to go do baseball, I'm all for it. Because I think when you play him, when you feel him and you play against him for those 50 to 60 to 70 offensive plays, at any moment he can do something with his legs, and not necessarily running, but getting out of a would-be sack, spinning out, and next thing you know, it's a 60-yard gain. And you know what that can do to you. So I think when you play that guy twice a year, what you do know is, and I'm sure, JB, you ruined my night because you knew the facts and the stats that we're now second place in terms of cumulative wins here. But Russell Wilson's got to be up there in wins since he's been in the league, and that's all you can ask a QB. JB, I bet you don't know where Russell ranks.
Well, we started the night comparing who knows more about Les, you or I, and we'll have plenty of time after the show to resolve that. But I don't want to let you out of here without asking about literature, life, philosophy, whatever you've got going on away from this facility that we always like to tap into and take your recommendations. Any good books, any good podcasts lately that we can
What is interesting, a day after a loss, I like to listen to any podcast that has nothing to do with football, just to try to ease the sting and pain of a loss. But it is interesting during September, October. It is a time for me, a few days a week, to let's call it study some of the books that I've read recently, and then sit down and try to say, okay, is there anything that I've learned in those books that we can actually apply to the Rams to help us continue evolved, continue to kind of try to stay a step ahead. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, right now, there's a book, Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, and that's just about decision making and how to avoid some of the natural cognitive biases we have when we go to make decisions, so that you can make sounder decisions. There's a book right now that's very applicable to the last 24 hours called Stillness. Ryan Holiday, who wrote Ego is the Enemy, Obstacles Away, which is very applicable to sports as well. But stillness is, hey, when there is noise, especially maybe your own noise, your own emotions, to how to find time to be quiet, to actually study, and again, the whole goal is to make sound decisions for the Los Angeles Rams.
All right, DeMarco, find you some stillness or maybe a non-football podcast for your drive home. Good to see you. And Les, thank you for stopping by. Sorry for ruining your night, but I'm pretty good at that. Coming up next, it's Lakers Talk with Alan Sliwa, getting you set for the NBA season ahead. We will have Thursday Night Football from Seattle here on the ESPN LA Rams Radio Network.